Behind Arnold Schwarzenegger's most testosterone-fueled rampage lies a treasure trove of bizarre production secrets. From a villain's suspiciously tight outfit to a young Alyssa Milano getting unexpected algebra tutoring from the Austrian Oak himself. Add in a shot-for-shot Russian remake, a rejected sequel that became Die Hard, and enough continuity errors to fill a small armory, and you've got cinema's most wonderfully unhinged action masterpiece hiding some truly unexpected stories. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Commando 1985. Fact 1. The bodybuilder who helped with homework. When 13-year-old Alyssa Milano was cast as Arnold Schwarzenegger's daughter Jenny in Commando, she had no idea that the intimidating Austrian bodybuilder would end up becoming her on-set math tutor. While filming the 1985 action movie, Milano was required by California law to spend at least 3 hours per day in school with a studio teacher, just like any other child actor working in Hollywood. What made this situation unusual was that the Terminator himself decided to take a personal interest in her education. According to Milano, who would later become famous for her role in the TV series Charmed, Schwarzenegger was incredibly protective of her throughout the entire production. He treated her almost like a real father figure, watching out for her safety and well-being on what was essentially a very dangerous action movie set, filled with explosions, gunfire, and intense stunt work. But his protective nature went far beyond just making sure she stayed safe during filming. Between takes, when Milano would sit down to work on her homework assignments, Schwarzenegger would often come over and offer to help her with her studies. The most memorable subject he assisted with was algebra, where the future governor of California would sit down with the young actress and work through math problems together. Milano later revealed in interviews that while Arnold was incredibly sweet and patient with her, he actually got some of the algebra problems wrong himself, proving that even action heroes have their academic weaknesses. The studio teacher on set, Arlene Singer, was still responsible for Milano's official education, but Schwarzenegger's willingness to help created an unusual dynamic where one of Hollywood's biggest action stars was moonlighting as an unpaid homework assistant. This behind-the-scenes kindness showed a completely different side of the man who spent most of his days on camera, mowing down bad guys with machine guns and delivering memorable one-liners. Milano has spoken fondly about this experience in numerous interviews over the years, describing how Arnold's genuine care and attention made the intense filming process much more comfortable for a young teenager working alongside seasoned action movie veterans. Fact 2. Bennett's uncomfortably tight outfit mystery solved. For decades, fans of Commando have wondered why the villain Bennett, played by Vernon Wells, looked so incredibly uncomfortable in his now infamous chainmail vest and leather pants that seemed several sizes too small. The answer lies in a last-minute casting change that created one of the most unintentionally memorable villain looks in 1980s action cinema. Vernon Wells was not the original actor chosen to play the psychotic ex-commando Bennett, who becomes Arnold Schwarzenegger's main antagonist. The role was initially given to Hauser, a character actor known for his work in various B-movies and television shows throughout the 70s and 80s. Hauser had already been fitted for his costume and was prepared to start filming when disaster struck on the very first day of production. Director Mark Lester made the dramatic decision to fire Hauser immediately after filming began. Though the exact reasons for this sudden dismissal have never been fully explained publicly. With production already underway and no time to spare, the filmmakers desperately needed a replacement who could step into the role without causing major delays to the shooting schedule. Vernon Wells, who had previously impressed audiences as the mohawked villain Wes in Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior, was quickly contacted and flown in to take over the part. The problem was that Wells had a significantly larger and more muscular build than Hauser. But the production team didn't have time or budget to create an entirely new costume for the replacement actor. This meant that Wells had to squeeze into the leather pants, chainmail vest, and other wardrobe pieces that had been specifically tailored for Hauser's smaller frame. The result was Bennett's distinctly uncomfortable appearance, with clothing that looked painted on and emphasized every bulge and curve in ways that were never intended by the costume designers. Welles himself has confirmed this story in interviews over the years, explaining that the tight-fitting costume contributed to Bennett's unusual look that many fans have described as resembling a member of the village people, or having a distinctly homoerotic quality. What was actually a practical production problem caused by rushed recasting accidentally created one of the most talked-about villain designs in action movie history. Fact 3. The Russian shot-for-shot remake. In 2008, 23 years after the original Commando hit theaters, Russian actor and filmmaker Mikhail Poroshenkov created what might be the most faithful unauthorized remake in cinema history. His film, titled Dane Jew, which translates to Day in English, reproduced approximately 80% of Arnold Schwarzenegger's action classic Shot for Shot, creating an almost surreal viewing experience for anyone familiar with the original movie. Poroshenkov, who served as both director and star of this Russian version, clearly had an obsessive love for the original Commando and decided to pay tribute by recreating nearly every scene, camera angle, and plot point with remarkable precision. In his version, he plays Ivan, a former Russian paratrooper whose daughter is kidnapped, forcing him to go on the same type of one-man rescue mission that made the original so memorable. The film follows the exact same story structure, with Ivan tracking down the bad guys and methodically eliminating them while searching for his daughter. What makes this remake particularly fascinating is how Poroshenkov adapted certain scenes to fit Russian culture and the updated time period while maintaining the spirit of the original. The most notable change was relocating the famous mall chase sequence to a water park, which actually made more sense logically since it gave the villain a plausible reason not to have a cell phone with him during the pursuit. This small but clever adjustment showed that the filmmakers were thinking about how to improve upon the original while still paying homage to it. The remake also included several moments of self-aware humor that acknowledged its relationship to the Schwarzenegger version. In one particularly memorable scene, when the Russian hero doesn't jump off the airplane during takeoff like Arnold's character famously did, one of the villains watching says, Schwarzenegger would have jumped off," directly referencing the original film. This kind of meta-commentary runs throughout the movie, suggesting that Poroshenkov was fully aware of what he was doing and wanted audiences to appreciate both the tribute and the absurdity of creating such a faithful recreation. The film became known online as Russian Commando and developed a cult following among fans of bizarre international cinema. Fact 4. The sequel that became Die Hard. One of the most surprising connections in action movie history involves Arnold Schwarzenegger's decision to turn down a sequel that would eventually transform into one of the greatest action films ever made. After Commando became a box office success in 1985, Hollywood naturally wanted to capitalize on its popularity by creating a follow-up film that would bring John Matrix back for another round of explosive mayhem. A script for Commando 2 was written and presented to Schwarzenegger, featuring the return of his character along with Ray Don Chong and Alyssa Milano reprising their roles from the original film. However, Arnold ultimately decided to pass on the project, choosing instead to pursue other opportunities that were coming his way as his star power continued to rise in Hollywood. This rejection left the studio with a completed screenplay, but no leading man to carry the sequel forward. Rather than simply shelving the project entirely, screenwriter Steven D'Souza made the creative decision to salvage the work by extensively reworking the script. D'Souza, who had co-written the original Commando, took the basic structure and many of the action elements from the rejected sequel and began adapting them into something completely different. He changed the main characters, altered key plot points, and relocated the setting to create what would eventually become the 1988 blockbuster Die Hard. The transformation from Commando 2 to Die Hard involved shifting the focus from an outdoor military-style action movie to a contained thriller set inside a Los Angeles office building during a Christmas party. John Matrix's character evolved into John McClane, played by Bruce Willis, and the story became about a regular police officer trapped in a building with terrorists rather than a super soldier on another rescue mission. This creative recycling process demonstrates how Hollywood scripts often evolve and change hands before reaching their final form. While D'Souza has confirmed this connection between the rejected Commando sequel and Die Hard, he has also debunked rumors that suggest the transformation was more direct than it actually was. The process involved significant rewriting and reimagining rather than simply changing character names, but the DNA of the original Commando sequel can still be found in the structure and pacing of what became one of the most influential action movies of the 1980s. Fact 5. Matrix's incredible kill count record. John Matrix holds the distinction of having one of the highest single-movie body counts in action cinema history, with various sources counting between 81 and 130 deaths at his hands throughout Commando's 90-minute runtime. This staggering number makes the film not only Arnold Schwarzenegger's most lethal performance, but also places it among the deadliest action movies ever produced by Hollywood. The massive kill count begins early in the film when Matrix starts eliminating the mercenaries who kidnapped his daughter, but it reaches truly epic proportions during the climactic assault on the villain's island compound. During this final sequence alone, Matrix racks up an estimated 74 kills, using an incredible variety of methods that showcase both his military training and his creative problem-solving abilities. The death toll includes 2 throat slashings, 51 shooting deaths, 1 stabbing, 2 kills with circular saw blades, 5 grenade explosions, 5 rocket launcher deaths, 7 deaths from planted explosives, and 1 unfortunate victim who gets impaled. What makes these numbers even more impressive is the sheer variety of weapons and methods Matrix employs throughout his rampage. Beyond traditional firearms like assault rifles and machine guns, he uses garden tools including pitchforks and axes, throws circular saw blades like deadly frisbees, deploys military explosives, and even resorts to hand-to-hand combat when the situation calls for it. The famous tool shed sequence alone demonstrates his ability to turn everyday gardening implements into lethal weapons, creating some of the most memorable and inventive kills in the entire film. Several websites and movie databases have attempted to create definitive counts of Matrix's victims, but the numbers vary, depending on how the counters handle explosion scenes where multiple enemies die simultaneously, or whether they include off-screen deaths that are implied but not directly shown. Some counts focus only on confirmed on-screen kills, while others include deaths that happen as a result of Matrix's actions but aren't directly witnessed by the audience. The variation in these numbers, ranging from the low 80s to over 130, reflects just how packed with violence this 90-minute film actually is, with new deaths occurring so frequently that even dedicated counters sometimes disagree on the exact totals. Fact 6. The vanishing love scene. During the production of Commando, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Rae Dawn Chong actually filmed a romantic love scene between their characters John Matrix and Cindy that was intended to deepen their relationship and add an emotional element to the high-octane action story. However, this intimate moment between the unlikely partners never made it to theaters because the chemistry between the two actors simply didn't translate convincingly to the screen. According to production records and cast interviews, the love scene was filmed as part of the original shooting schedule, likely taking place during one of the quieter moments in the story, when Matrix and Cindy are working together to track down his kidnapped daughter. The filmmakers probably envisioned this romantic interlude as a way to show how the flight attendant and the retired commando had developed feelings for each other during their dangerous adventure together, giving audiences an emotional payoff beyond just the action sequences. When director Mark Lester and the editing team reviewed the footage during post-production, they quickly realized that the romantic chemistry between Schwarzenegger and Chong was completely unconvincing and felt forced rather than natural. The scene apparently came across as awkward and uncomfortable to watch, failing to create the emotional connection that the filmmakers had hoped would enhance the story. Rather than trying to salvage the sequence through creative editing or reshooting, the decision was made to cut it entirely from the final version of the film. This deleted love scene has never surfaced publicly in any form, not appearing on any of the various DVD or Blu-ray releases of Commando over the years, including the special edition versions that typically include deleted scenes and behind-the-scenes footage. The footage appears to have been completely removed from the film's archives, making it one of those lost pieces of movie history that fans will likely never get to see. The absence of this romantic subplot actually works in the film's favor, allowing Commando to maintain its relentless pace and focus entirely on Matrix's mission to rescue his daughter without any romantic distractions, slowing down the action. Fact 7. The mall shared with Terminator 2. The Sherman Oaks Galleria in California holds the unique distinction of being Arnold Schwarzenegger's favorite location for cinematic destruction, serving as the backdrop for memorable action sequences in not just one but two of his biggest blockbuster films. This shopping center first appeared in Commando during the intense chase scene where Matrix pursues the villain Sully through the mall, and it would later become famous again when it was featured in Terminator 2, Judgment Day 6 years later. In Commando, the Sherman Oaks Galleria provided the perfect setting for one of the film's most exciting sequences, where Matrix tracks Sully to the mall and engages in a dramatic pursuit that involves gunfire, crashes, and the memorable moment where Arnold picks up an entire phone booth with Sully inside and flips it over. The filmmakers used the mall for 6 consecutive days of night shooting, filming after the stores had closed to avoid disrupting normal business operations and to give them complete control over the environment. When James Cameron was preparing to film Terminator 2, Judgment Day in 1991, he chose to return to this same location for the famous motorcycle chase scene where the young John Connor flees from the liquid metal T-1000 through the mall's corridors. The selection of the Sherman Oaks Galleria for this sequence created an interesting connection between the two Arnold Schwarzenegger films, even though he played completely different characters in each movie. The mall's appearance in both films reflects the practical considerations that often drive location choices in Hollywood filmmaking. The Sherman Oaks Galleria offered the right combination of architectural features, available space for equipment, and cooperative management that made it attractive to production companies looking for an indoor location that could accommodate complex action sequences. However, fans who visit the location today will find that the mall has been significantly remodeled since both films were shot there, so the distinctive look that appears in Commando and Terminator 2 no longer exists. This shared location has become a fun piece of trivia for Arnold Schwarzenegger fans, who can point to the Sherman Oaks Galleria as the one place where both John Matrix and the Terminator left their mark on the same physical space, making it a unique landmark in action movie history. Fact 8. The Tool Shed's deleted brutality. The Tool Shed massacre sequence in Commando is already one of the most violent and creative killing sprees in action movie history, but the original version filmed by director Mark Lester was actually even more extreme and disturbing than what audiences eventually saw in theaters. Among the various brutal deaths that Matrix inflicts on enemy soldiers using gardening equipment, there was one particular moment that crossed the line from violent action into territory that even the filmmakers considered too macabre for public consumption. In the scene as it appears in the final cut, Matrix uses a machete to chop off a soldier's arm in one swift motion, creating a shocking moment of graphic violence that demonstrates just how ruthlessly efficient the retired Commando can be when cornered and fighting for his life. However, the original script and filmed footage took this moment one step further in a way that would have pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable even for an rated action film in 1985. According to production notes and crew accounts, Arnold Schwarzenegger was supposed to pick up the soldier's severed arm immediately after cutting it off, and then proceed to beat the wounded man with his own dismembered limb. This grotesque follow-up to the amputation would have created a moment of dark comedy mixed with extreme violence that the filmmakers ultimately decided was simply too much for audiences to handle, even those who were prepared for Commando's over-the-top action sequences. The decision to remove this particular beat from the scene came during the editing process, when director Mark Lester and the production team realized that having Matrix use a severed arm as a weapon crossed from action movie violence into something that felt more like a horror film. They were concerned that this level of macabre detail would be so disturbing that it might actually take audiences out of the movie, rather than adding to the excitement of the action sequence. This deleted moment represents one of the few times that the makers of Commando actually pulled back from their commitment to extreme violence, choosing to tone down the carnage in order to maintain the film's focus on entertaining action rather than shocking gore. The tool shed sequence remains incredibly violent even without this deleted brutality, featuring multiple creative deaths with various gardening implements. Fact 9. The magical self-healing car. One of the most noticeable continuity errors in Commando involves Sully's yellow Porsche convertible, which demonstrates an almost supernatural ability to repair itself between scenes during the film's chase sequence. This glaring mistake has become a favorite among movie error enthusiasts and demonstrates just how fast-paced the production schedule was during the making of this 1985 action film. The error occurs during the dramatic sequence where Matrix chases Sully through the streets and eventually corners him at a cliff overlooking the ocean. During this high-speed pursuit, both vehicles sustain significant damage from the aggressive driving and multiple collisions that occur as Matrix tries to force Sully's car off the road. By the time the chase ends with both cars crashing and Matrix dangling Sully over the cliff by his ankle, the yellow Porsche shows extensive damage to its bodywork, with dents, scratches, and other visible signs of the violent encounter clearly visible on camera. However, after Matrix delivers his famous line, "Remember, Sully, when I promised to kill you last? I lied," and drops the villain to his death, he walks back to the damaged Porsche and drives away. In the shot of Matrix driving off in Sully's car, the vehicle appears to be in pristine condition, with all the previous damage mysteriously vanished as if the chase sequence had never happened. The car looks showroom perfect, with no trace of the dents, scratches, or other battle scars that were clearly visible just moments before. The magical repair job doesn't last long, however, because when Matrix and Cindy arrive at their next destination, the yellow Porsche once again displays all the damage from the chase scene, with the dents and scratches having somehow returned between locations. This back-and-forth appearance and disappearance of damage suggests that the filmmakers were using multiple cars during production, including both damaged and undamaged versions of the same vehicle, but failed to maintain consistency during the editing process. This type of continuity error was more common in action films of the 1980s, when productions often moved quickly and editors had less time to catch these kinds of mistakes before the final cut was completed and sent to theaters. Fact 10. Gene Simmons was almost Matrix. The character of John Matrix that made Arnold Schwarzenegger a household name in action movies was originally conceived for a completely different type of performer, with screenwriter Jeff Loeb initially writing the role specifically for Gene Simmons, the fire-breathing bassist and co-founder of the legendary rock band Kiss. This casting choice would have created a dramatically different version of Commando, transforming the muscular Austrian bodybuilder's signature role into a vehicle for one of rock and roll's most theatrical personalities. Loeb's original script featured a very different backstory for the main character, focusing on an Israeli special forces agent who had grown tired of the constant violence and destruction in the Middle East, and decided to quit his military service to emigrate to the United States. This version of the character was seeking a peaceful new life in America when circumstances forced him out of retirement to rescue his kidnapped daughter, creating a more emotionally complex motivation than the final version that appeared on screen. When Gene Simmons was approached about starring in this early version of Commando, he ultimately decided to pass on the opportunity, showing no interest in taking on what would have been his first major leading role in a big-budget action film. A respected dramatic actor who had recently gained attention for his rugged performances in films like 48 Hours and would have brought a completely different energy to the role than either Simmons or Schwarzenegger. However, Nolte also passed on the project, leaving the producers without their preferred leading man and forcing them to reconsider both the casting and the script itself. When Arnold Schwarzenegger became available and expressed interest in the role, Screenwriter Steven D'Souza was brought in to completely rewrite the material to better suit the Austrian bodybuilder's unique screen presence and physical capabilities. This rewrite transformed the character from an out-of-shape former Israeli agent struggling with the physical demands of his mission into the unstoppable killing machine that audiences know and love, creating one of the most iconic action heroes of the 1980s in the process. Fact 11. The cardboard army explosion. During the climactic assault on the enemy compound, Matrix detonates a series of explosives that create massive fireballs and destroy multiple buildings in spectacular fashion, but careful viewers can spot one of the most amusing cost-cutting measures in action movie history. When the explosions go off and the camera captures the destruction from various angles, some of the enemy soldiers who appear to be standing guard in front of the buildings are actually flat cardboard cutouts that have been propped up with wooden supports to create the illusion of a larger defending force. This budget-conscious special effects technique becomes particularly obvious when the explosions occur and these cardboard soldiers remain perfectly rigid and motionless, while real stunt performers nearby react to the blasts with appropriate human movement and responses. The cardboard figures stand unnaturally straight and show no realistic human reactions to the massive explosions happening just feet away from them, creating an unintentionally comedic moment in what was supposed to be the film's most intense and dramatic action sequence. The use of cardboard cutouts was likely a practical decision made by the production team to make the enemy compound appear more heavily defended, without having to hire additional stunt performers or extras for the dangerous explosion scenes. Creating realistic pyrotechnic effects requires careful safety planning and significant expense, so using fake soldiers allowed the filmmakers to achieve the visual impact they wanted, while keeping both costs and safety risks manageable during the complex sequence. What makes this particular movie mistake even more entertaining is that these obviously fake soldiers somehow manage to die in the explosion just like their flesh and blood counterparts, with the cardboard figures tumbling over or getting knocked down by the blast effects in ways that were clearly choreographed by the crew. The wooden props holding up the cutouts presumably break or fall over during the explosions, creating the illusion that even the fake soldiers are casualties of Matrix's devastating assault. This type of low-budget special effects trickery was fairly common in 1980s action films, where practical effects and creative camera work often had to substitute for the expensive digital effects that would become available in later decades, resulting in charming mistakes that have become beloved parts of these films' legacy. Fact 12. The fictional country shared universe. The fictional South American country of Valverde that serves as the backdrop for much of Commando's political intrigue is not unique to that film, but actually appears in several other major action movies, creating an intriguing possibility that these films all exist within the same cinematic universe. This shared geographical reference was the brainchild of screenwriter Steven D'Souza, who created Valverde as a convenient fictional location that could represent any generic Latin American nation without causing real-world diplomatic problems for the studios. Valverde first appears in Commando as the homeland of the deposed dictator Arias, who Matrix and his team had previously helped overthrow before the events of the film. The country is described as the place where Matrix was supposed to assassinate the current president in order to restore Arias to power, though Matrix obviously chooses to rescue his daughter instead of carrying out this political mission. 2 years later, in 1987's Predator, Valverde appears again as the setting for Dutch's Special Forces mission to rescue hostages from guerrilla fighters in the Central American jungle. Arnold Schwarzenegger's character Dutch leads a team of elite soldiers into Valverde's dangerous wilderness, where they encounter not only human enemies, but also the deadly alien hunter that gives the film its title. This creates a fascinating potential connection between Matrix and Dutch, since both are Special Forces operatives who have conducted missions in the same fictional country. The shared universe theory becomes even more interesting when Valverde appears a third time in Die Hard 2. Die Harder, released in 1990. In that film, The country is mentioned as the origin of the corrupt general, whose rescue drives the plot of Bruce Willis's second outing as John McClane. Stephen D'Souza explained that he deliberately reused this fictional location across multiple projects because it allowed filmmakers to create stories involving Central American political conflicts without accidentally offending real nations or getting tangled up in actual geopolitical situations. This repeated use of Valverde opens up entertaining possibilities for fans to imagine how these different characters and storylines might be connected, such as whether Matrix could have later joined Dutch's team for the Predator mission, or whether McClane might be aware of the various military operations that have taken place in this troubled fictional nation. Fact 13. The African Child Soldiers training film. Years after Commando became a worldwide hit, director Mark L. Lester discovered that his action movie had found an audience he never intended or wanted when he learned about a deeply troubling real-world application of his film's most violent sequences. Lester revealed in interviews that he had come across a book documenting the recruitment and training methods used with child soldiers in various African conflicts, and was shocked to discover that Commando had become an unwitting tool in these tragic situations. According to Lester's account, the book described how military groups recruiting children would show them the climactic battle sequence from Commando, particularly the scenes where Matrix single-handedly destroys an entire army compound and eliminates dozens of enemy soldiers with various weapons. The recruiters apparently used these explosive action scenes to get young children excited about the idea of warfare and to make fighting seem glamorous and heroic rather than dangerous and deadly. The director expressed deep concern and regret upon learning about this unintended consequence of his work, stating that the discovery was disturbing and made him realize how far-reaching the influence of violent entertainment could be. Lester noted that filmmakers often don't consider the potential real-world effects their movies might have on vulnerable populations, especially in regions where warfare and conflict are ongoing realities rather than fictional entertainment. This revelation highlighted the complex relationship between action movies and real violence, particularly in parts of the world where armed conflict is a daily reality for many people. The idea that scenes designed purely for entertainment purposes in a Hollywood action film could be repurposed as recruitment tools for child soldiers represents one of the most troubling examples of how fictional violence can intersect with real-world tragedy. Lester's comments about this discovery reflect the broader ongoing debate about the responsibility that filmmakers bear for how their violent content might be interpreted or misused by audiences they never intended to reach. The director's obvious discomfort with learning about this particular use of his film demonstrates that even creators of intentionally over-the-top action movies can be genuinely disturbed when their fictional violence becomes connected to actual human suffering and exploitation. Fact 14. Bennett's suspected homoerotic obsession. For nearly 4 decades, fans and film critics have speculated about the true nature of Bennett's obsession with John Matrix, with many suggesting that the villain's intense hatred might actually mask romantic feelings for his former commanding officer. This theory has gained credibility over the years thanks to comments from cast members and the unmistakable homoerotic undertones that permeate Bennett's scenes throughout the film. The most direct support for this interpretation comes from Rae Dawn Chong, who played Cindy in the movie and worked closely with both Arnold Schwarzenegger and Vernon Wells during production. In interviews included on the film's DVD commentary and special features, Chong openly discussed what she saw as the sexual tension between the two characters, stating that they're like lovers and describing their relationship as a twisted romance gone wrong. She also made pointed observations about Bennett's appearance, noting that with his tight leather outfit and prominent mustache, he looks like one of the village people. Film critics and scholars have analyzed various elements of Bennett's behavior that support this theory, including the way he always refers to Matrix by his first name, while Matrix maintains distance by using Bennett's last name. Bennett's dialogue is filled with double meanings and sexually charged language, particularly his threat to shoot Matrix between the balls rather than between the eyes. which some interpret as targeting the source of his romantic frustration. The visual design of Bennett's character also contributes to this interpretation, with his chainmail vest, leather pants, and overall appearance creating what one film magazine described as a leather daddy aesthetic that was commonly associated with certain segments of gay culture in the 1980s. Director Mark Lester has consistently denied any intentional homoerotic subtext, insisting that Bennett was meant to be portrayed as an extremely masculine soldier. But screenwriter Steven D'Souza has acknowledged that the wardrobe choices led to widespread speculation about the character's motivations. The theory suggests that Bennett's expulsion from Matrix's unit might have occurred because Matrix discovered Bennett's romantic feelings, leading to a rejection that transformed love into murderous obsession. This interpretation adds psychological depth to what might otherwise be a simple revenge plot, explaining Bennett's intense personal vendetta against his former commander. Fact 15. The 400-pound phone booth flip. One of the most memorable moments in Commando occurs when Matrix picks up an entire telephone booth with Sully trapped inside and flips it over during their chase through the Sherman Oaks Galleria. But what makes this scene even more impressive is that Arnold Schwarzenegger actually performed this incredible feat of strength himself, without the aid of special effects or movie magic. During a 1985 television interview with respected film critic Gene Siskel, Schwarzenegger revealed the exact details of this superhuman display of raw power that left audiences wondering whether what they were seeing was real or enhanced. When Siskel played a clip from the movie showing the phone booth flip and asked Schwarzenegger about the logistics of the stunt, the Austrian bodybuilder provided specific numbers that demonstrated just how extraordinary his physical capabilities were at the time. According to Schwarzenegger's account, the telephone booth itself weighed 270 pounds, which was already a substantial amount of weight for any person to lift and maneuver, but the situation became even more challenging because there was a stuntman inside the booth who weighed an additional 130 pounds. This meant that Schwarzenegger was actually lifting and flipping a combined weight of 400 pounds when he performed this stunt for the cameras, an amount that would challenge even professional strongmen and powerlifters working under ideal conditions. When Siskel asked whether Arnold could actually handle 400 pounds, Schwarzenegger responded confidently that it was no problem for him, explaining that he had been lifting weights his entire life, and that this level of strength was well within his capabilities. The phone booth flip represents one of the rare instances in action movie history where a star's real-life physical abilities actually matched or exceeded what their character was supposed to be capable of on screen. While most action heroes rely on stunt doubles, special effects, and movie tricks to create the illusion of superhuman strength, Schwarzenegger's background as a world champion bodybuilder meant that he could genuinely perform many of the incredible physical feats that made John Matrix such an unstoppable force of nature throughout the film.